Most people believe they are searching for truth. They buy books and underline sentences they hope might contain the answer. They listen to teachers during long drives or quiet evenings. They explore religion, philosophy, psychology, science. They genuinely want to understand reality. They want to know what is true. And yet, if you step back and look carefully at the world, something strange becomes obvious. Millions of people are searching. Almost none of them ever arrive. People search for years, sometimes decades. They move from one belief system to another the way travelers move from one city to the next. A new philosophy, a new teacher, a new framework for understanding life. Each one promising clarity. Each one claiming to reveal how reality actually works. For a while, each new idea feels promising. There is always a moment of excitement at the beginning. The moment when you feel like you might finally be getting closer. But eventually something strange happens. The clarity fades, questions return, and the search begins again. Why does this happen? Why do so many intelligent, sincere people spend their entire lives searching for truth and still feel like they are standing in the same place? The answer is not what most people expect. It is not because truth is complicated. It is not because truth is hidden somewhere in a secret book or ancient teaching. And it is not because people are not trying hard enough. Most people never find truth because they are trapped inside the one mechanism that guarantees they never will. And once you see that mechanism clearly, you begin to understand something unsettling. The search itself can quietly become the trap. The search for truth usually begins with a moment when life stops making sense. Sometimes it happens suddenly. Other times it arrives slowly. A growing feeling that something about the world is not adding up. Maybe someone finally achieved the success they spent 10 years chasing, only to realize that the satisfaction they expected never arrived. Maybe religion began to feel mechanical instead of alive. Maybe the explanations society offers for life started sounding rehearsed, like everyone is repeating something they heard somewhere else. So the search begins. Daniel experienced this in his late 20s. From the outside, his life looked successful. He had a stable job at a consulting firm. His apartment was clean and quiet, with a desk by the window and a shelf filled with books he had collected over the years. Friends respected him. His parents were proud of him. But inside, something felt strangely hollow. It wasn't exactly sadness. It was more like an absence. Life seemed organized, but not meaningful. Late at night, Daniel would sit at his small kitchen table with a lamp glowing above him, flipping through books, searching for sentences that might explain the strange feeling he couldn't name. So Daniel began looking for answers. At first, it was simple curiosity. He picked up a book on philosophy, then another. Soon his evenings were filled with reading. First philosophy, then psychology, then spirituality. Each new system felt promising. A new explanation of reality, a new framework for understanding life. For a while, each one felt like progress. There is always excitement in the beginning, the moment when an idea seems to illuminate everything. But eventually, something strange would happen. The excitement faded, questions returned, so Daniel moved on, a different philosophy, a different teacher, a different explanation of reality. Years passed like this. Daniel became extremely knowledgeable. He could discuss psychological theories that most people had never heard of. He could explain spiritual traditions from cultures thousands of miles away. He understood philosophical frameworks that once seemed impossibly complex. But something still had not happened. He still didn't understand reality. He had accumulated knowledge, but clarity never arrived. And Daniel's experience is not unusual. It is the normal path of most people searching for truth, because something subtle happens during the search. Something almost invisible. The search slowly becomes guided by identity. Most people believe they are searching for truth, but unconsciously they are protecting something else, their identity. Every belief system they explore, every philosophy they adopt, every spiritual framework they experiment with, is filtered through one quiet question. A question that rarely appears consciously. What version of reality allows me to remain the person I believe I am? That question quietly shapes the entire search. If a teaching confirms identity, it feels attractive. If a teaching threatens identity, the mind resists it. Not because the teaching is false, but because it feels uncomfortable. This is why people can explore hundreds of ideas while still avoiding the one realization that might actually change them. Because the mind is not just searching, it is filtering, accepting ideas that reinforce identity, rejecting ideas that threaten it. And when that happens, the search becomes endless. Not because truth is unavailable, but because the identity doing the searching is being protected. Sophia discovered another version of the same trap. Her search began through spirituality, meditation retreats, energy practices, ancient traditions. For the first time in years, life felt alive. The quiet of meditation felt meaningful. The language of spirituality gave her a sense that she was finally touching something deeper. But over time, Sophia began noticing something subtle. Her identity was changing, but it was not dissolving. Instead of seeing through identity, she was building a new one. The identity of someone spiritual, someone awakened, someone who understood truths others could not see. This happens constantly. Religion becomes identity. Spirituality becomes identity. Philosophy becomes identity. Even self-improvement becomes identity. The system changes, but the mechanism remains the same. Identity adapts. It does not disappear. And when identity remains intact, something essential remains hidden. David fell into a different version of the same trap. His path was intellectual. He believed that if he could simply understand reality clearly enough, everything else in life would make sense. So he read constantly: ancient philosophy, modern philosophy, psychology, political theory, history. His apartment slowly filled with bookshelves. Stacks of books sat beside his bed. His evenings disappeared into reading. He could debate ideas that most people had never encountered. But slowly something happened that David did not notice. His identity began to change. He was no longer simply curious about truth. He was someone intelligent, someone who saw through the illusions of society, someone who understood reality more deeply than others. And once that identity formed, the search quietly stopped being about truth. It became about protecting the identity of someone who understands truth. This happens constantly. The philosopher becomes attached to philosophy. The scientist becomes attached to science. The spiritual teacher becomes attached to spirituality. The system meant to reveal truth becomes the system protecting identity. And once identity becomes involved, truth becomes harder to see. But here is the paradox. The systems themselves are not the problem. Religion is not the problem. Philosophy is not the problem. Spiritual traditions are not the problem. They are tools. Tools can illuminate reality. They can guide attention. They can point toward truth. But they cannot replace truth itself. And the moment the tool becomes identity, the tool becomes a prison. History offers one of the clearest examples of this paradox. Consider the story of Christ. In his time, religion was extremely serious. The religious leaders were disciplined, devoted. They had spent their lives studying sacred texts, following the rules, teaching others how to live. By every visible standard, they were the most righteous people in society. And yet something remarkable happened. When Christ appeared, they could not recognize him. Not only did they fail to recognize him, they were offended by him, threatened by him. Eventually, they plotted to kill him. How does something like that happen? How can people devoted to God fail to recognize the presence of God standing directly in front of them? Because religion had become identity. The system meant to point toward God had quietly taken the place of God. The tool had become the destination. And when truth appeared outside the system they had built their identity around, they could not see it. This is the danger. Not religion, not philosophy, not spirituality. The danger is identity attaching itself to the tool. And this pattern appears again and again throughout history. Whenever a system replaces truth, truth becomes offensive. Marcus encountered a different version of this trap. His path wasn't religion. It wasn't philosophy. It was self-improvement. Marcus was the kind of person who believed life could be engineered. His apartment shelves were filled with books about success, morning routines, productivity systems, optimization. He had spreadsheets for his goals, apps for tracking habits, a calendar that divided his days into carefully planned blocks of time. Marcus genuinely believed he was improving his life. And in many ways, he was. He woke up earlier, he exercised more, he read constantly. He learned how to manage his time, his attention, his discipline. The promise of self-improvement felt powerful. The promise that you could become the best possible version of yourself. At first, the path felt empowering. Every few months, Marcus discovered a new method, a new system, a new idea about how to structure his life more efficiently. Each one felt like progress. But after several years, something strange began to happen. The improvement never ended. There was always another system, another productivity method, another habit to install, another book explaining how to optimize life just a little bit further. Marcus began to notice something unsettling. He was always improving, but he never felt like he had arrived. There was always another version of himself he was supposed to become. Another level of discipline, another level of success, another level of optimization. The destination kept moving. And slowly Marcus began to realize something uncomfortable. The identity of someone becoming better had quietly replaced the discovery of what was real. The path had become a loop. Again, the system itself wasn't the problem. The problem was identity attaching itself to the system. Society unintentionally strengthens this mechanism because the world rewards identity. People receive recognition for being the successful person, the spiritual person, the intellectual person, the religious person, the disciplined person. Each identity carries status, and status reinforces attachment. Marcus noticed this in small moments. When people admired his discipline, when friends asked how he managed to stay so productive, when someone said they wished they had his focus. Those moments felt good. They reinforced something. And slowly, without realizing it, Marcus began protecting that identity. The identity of someone who had their life together, someone disciplined, someone improving. And once identity becomes socially rewarded, letting go becomes difficult. Because letting go doesn't only threaten personal identity, it threatens social identity. The way others see you, the role you play, the image you built. And so the search quietly becomes constrained, not only by the identity inside the person, but by the expectations surrounding them. This is the hidden mechanism that traps most seekers. Truth cannot be discovered by reinforcing identity. But most systems unintentionally strengthen identity. The religious identity, the spiritual identity, the intellectual identity, the self-improvement identity. Identity adapts to every path. It is remarkably flexible. If someone walks into religion, identity becomes religious. If someone enters spirituality, identity becomes spiritual. If someone studies philosophy, identity becomes intellectual. The path changes, but the identity remains. And as long as identity remains protected, truth remains filtered. Identity performs a very specific function. It protects continuity. The mind wants to feel like the same person from one moment to the next. That sense of continuity creates stability. But it also creates blindness, because when a realization threatens identity, the mind experiences it as danger, not intellectual disagreement, danger. That's why people react so strongly when their beliefs are challenged. The reaction seems emotional, but it is actually protective. If someone's identity is built around being spiritual, challenging their spirituality feels like an attack. If someone's identity is built around intellect, challenging their philosophy feels threatening. If someone's identity is built around religion, questioning that religion can feel offensive. The reaction is not rational, it is instinctive, identity defending itself. And this mechanism quietly guides the search for truth. People adopt systems that reinforce identity. They reject systems that threaten it, which means the search is no longer neutral. It becomes guided, filtered, distorted. Truth is no longer the destination. Identity preservation becomes the hidden goal. And this creates the deepest paradox of the search, because truth does something identity cannot tolerate. Truth dissolves illusions, including the illusion of the self people believe they are. This is why genuine encounters with truth often feel uncomfortable, disorienting, sometimes even frightening. Not because truth harms people, but because illusions cannot survive its presence. The real shift begins when the search changes direction, not toward another system, not toward another explanation of reality, but toward the one thing that had been assumed the entire time, the identity doing the searching. Instead of asking which philosophy is correct, or which system explains reality best, a different question begins to appear. A question that feels almost unsettling when it first arises. What if the thing searching is the problem? What if the mind searching for truth is the same mind protecting the identity that cannot see it? That realization changes the entire search, because now the goal is no longer finding the perfect explanation. The goal becomes seeing clearly, seeing where identity attaches, seeing where belief becomes defensive, seeing where the mind quietly protects the image it has built of itself. And when that observation begins, something unexpected happens. The search begins to slow down, not because curiosity disappears, but because the pressure to define reality begins to dissolve. The systems remain, religion remains, philosophy remains, spiritual practice remains, but they return to what they were always meant to be. Tools. Religion becomes a tool. Philosophy becomes a tool. Meditation becomes a tool. They illuminate reality, they point towards something, but they cannot replace truth itself. And the moment the tool becomes identity, the tool becomes a prison. Truth is not something constructed by systems. Truth becomes visible when illusions fall away, and the deepest illusion is often the identity doing the searching. This is why many traditions describe truth as awakening, not acquiring knowledge, but seeing something that was always present, seeing something that had been there the entire time. The search for truth does not end when someone finds the perfect philosophy. It ends when the identity searching for it is finally seen clearly. And when that happens, something simple becomes obvious. Truth was never hiding. Reality was never distant. God was never absent. Only the identity searching for truth was standing in the way. And when that identity loosens, something extraordinary happens. The world becomes quieter, clearer, the frantic search fades, and in that quiet, something begins to reveal itself. Not a new philosophy, not a new belief, but the simple recognition of what was always there. Truth was never hiding. Only the identity searching for it was in the way.